Welcome, welcome to the Edgewalker Cafe on December 8th, 2022. I'm Judy Neal. I'm the founder of Edgewalkers International, and our facilitator for this wonderful conversation today is Susan Furness. So over to you, Susan.
Judy, thank you very much. And thank you all for being here. Really pleased to have you. Also very excited to have a panel with us today. And, you know, sometimes we don't work with a panel in just a 40 to 60 minute session because we find it a little bit difficult sometimes, and also, you know, not giving enough time for us all to join in. And indeed, particularly difficult when we don't have our gorgeous friend Sharad Agarwal from Only Webinars, you know, hosting the event. So I don't know if Sharad's in the room today, but he did suddenly find himself free and thought he could come. So I'm just going to honor Sharad in whether he's here or not, in tandem with today's title, which is the difficulty of simplifying what we do. And as we all know, all of us that may have hosted on Zoom during this last couple of years particularly, it's not always easy, but Sharad makes it seem terribly easy. And so tonight, we're not in a room where you just see that it's not a webinar room, we're in the Zoom room. So just to let you know, you will have 4 speakers, including me. So if you want to go to speaker view, which should be in the top right-hand corner of your screen, if you wanted, so that you always got the spotlight on the speaker, but I'll leave that to you all to do. And also, I'm going to just say to you that, you know, in feeling into the energy of how difficult it is to simplify what we do sometimes, we've been a bit naughty, and we've opted to stretch the time, possibly over the hour, to 75 minutes. So I'm just letting you know that too, in case that really doesn't work for you all. And I'll try not to do it, but if we're being so juicy and in exploring practices that can help us be even when that going gets tough, then we're going to stay with it. And the reason why we're also going to stay with it and maybe go over is because we have a lovely finale for you today. It is a musical finale, which I'll let you know now, just in case some of you were thinking, oh, I will go at 60 minutes. But then, Lara, I could see you jogging a little bit there. Yeah, okay, good. You're going to stay for the music. Ellis, give us a wave. It's Ellis Ralph that's going to play us out today. Can you wave to us, Ellis? There's Ellis. So Ellis has got something up his sleeve, which is going to feel really simple, although, of course, we know making music isn't simple at all. So, look, I'm Susan Furness, as Judy said. I'm a senior Edgewalker associate. I'm also a coach in spiritual intelligence, and I'm thrilled to see that Cindy Wigglesworth is in the room. Cindy is the author of the book, 21 Skills of Spiritual Intelligence. Here she is coming on camera. Thank you, Cindy. Hi. Thank you for being here. Oh, and guess what? Somebody heard us talking about him. Sharad Agarwal has entered the room. Hello, Sharad. I can see you here. He's here in the audience and leaving me with the difficult task of managing you all. Bless you for this practice at the end of the year, Sharad. Thank you so much, having so elegantly hosted us through the year. We love you very, very much. So yeah, so my panel, I'm going to ask you all to wave as I mention your names. I have 3 wonderful panelists, as I mentioned to you. I'm going to say, first of all, Steve Sphar. Are you there? There you are. Hello, Steve. Steve's just wonderful and been a great supporter to me through the years. When the going gets tough, I know who to reach out to. Steve Sphar. And like Judy, myself, and indeed Jon Freeman, who's on the screen there as well. Hi, Jon. we're all coaches of spiritual intelligence with Cindy Wigglesworth. And Steve is also an amazing wisdom maker, and he makes wisdom so amazing by making it practical. So you tell us a bit about that in a minute, Steve. And then we've also got Mark Wentworth. Just give us a wave, Mark. There's Mark. Mark speaks with the language of color, and you didn't need me to tell you that, did you? Because just look at his background, it's looking gorgeous there. So actually, do you know what I'm going to do though? Jon, you've got your mute off. I'm going to let each of you just introduce yourselves so that, you know, my voice doesn't get monotonous. So Jon Freeman, tell us a little bit about you and what you might do today to help us simplifying the difficulty of what we do. Jon.
Well, thank you, Susan, and hello, everyone. And before I talk about me, I'm just going to give warning that I might move around, stand up. I'm under strict instructions from my chiropractor from this morning not to stay sitting for the length of this meeting. And if I wince, that might also be a sign that it's nothing too serious. So with that warning, I'm in the UK in a small city called Salisbury, and my background, my way of, I guess, coming here, as Susan has mentioned, I go back some way with the with Cindy and the SQ coaching process. And I connected with Cindy because we have a shared interest in spiral dynamics, which is a big passion of mine, one where I'm, you know, that's a kind of a large chunk of my work as a practitioner and master trainer. And then the third thing I think I would mention is that I have a particular view of reality and how we have been misled into thinking reality works in a certain way, which it actually doesn't. I wrote a book about the underlying science of that called The Science of Possibility. And my work these days is increasingly about making that applicable. So how do you use that knowledge? And that's where I will hopefully talk from when we start to get into the meat.
Well, that sounds awesome, Jon. And thank you for reminding me of the book title. I was running around trying to find the book earlier and I couldn't because I do have a copy. Science Possibility. Yes, please. Steve Sphar, what about you?
Yeah, what about me? Well, I'm Steve Sphar. I have been an attorney and a business consultant and a leadership coach. I'm mostly retired from that work now. I did a lot of writing during that work, but now I'm concentrating on being a writer of personal growth and spiritual development. I'm the creator of practicalwisdom.blog, which is a site that's devoted to helping us remember the truth of who we are. The truth of who we are is an inner core that I would call the higher self. It's got all the aspirational qualities we want, the best qualities of being human, being generous, patient, loving, kind. But that beautiful inner core of ourselves is also trying to navigate a whitewater world out there with a lot of noise, with endless distraction. And so this site, practicalwisdom.blog, is trying to help us remember the truth of who we are in the middle of all of this whitewater. So I post every Tuesday and usually on 3 topics: mindfulness, kind of how to stay aware, compassion, how to be loving and forgiving, or on practice, or how to build those qualities within ourselves to stay centered and grounded in our higher self. So that's the work that I'm concentrating on now.
And thank you for really making that focus and manifesting those blogs, Steve. And thank you for ensuring that I get a good read and a good reminder every week, because of course you kindly let me in on the entry point of practicalwisdom.blog, and it's been such a joy. Thank you so much. And what's also a joy to me is to know that something that I really enjoy very much myself, as a fashion buyer in my very early life. I started my career in retail and in fashion in my teens, is colour. And can you imagine how excited I was when I met Mark Wentworth a good few years ago now, to really be told, or to realize that yes, colour does speak. It really does speak. It has a language. It's not all about aesthetics only. Is it, Mark?
Well, first of all, hello everyone. My name is Mark Wentworth, and Jon is down in Salisbury. And the thing we share between where I am, Jon is in Salisbury, I'm in Norwich, is we both have very similar cathedrals. Sometimes the two are very mixed up. We have an amazing cathedral cities. And yeah, probably professionally, I've been working and studying color for 35 years, but it's really been with me for way back. There's a very story that I tell of seeing what I remember, my first rainbow about 5 or 6 years old, and being totally captivated by it because it seemed to be filled with so many different stories and possibilities, little knowing at 5 or 6 that really I just met my, let's say, life's vocation. But it's been a progress. I trained as a makeup artist in special effects, and so I always say to people, I can tell you how to look worse, but I can't tell you how to look better from the point of view of the makeup perspective. But I can certainly, for sure, through the language of color, because our topic today is about simplicity. And if you think literally from the moment we're born until the day we leave this world, and probably beyond that, we are always surrounded by this amazing thing called color. And as we become more color conscious, we start to realize that we're constantly telling a story by the colors that we choose to have around us. And part of my work is, one of the things I would encourage you to do is try watching a film without the sound. Just pay attention to the color, because there's always an amazing visual, as a visual story. Color is an amazing visual storyteller. And similar to what Steve was saying, through my work with color, it's about helping people to remember is, who were you born to be? And we'll get on to that more as we go into the simplicity of being.
Thank you so much, Mark. Yeah, I mean, I've heard that story about, you're waking up at the age of 6 and seeing a rainbow before, and it never fails to touch me so tenderly. I mean, rainbows indeed, even if we don't get to see one as a little 6-year-old, we're definitely probably learning about rainbows and the colors of the rainbows in our early years creative learning environment. So important. Such a initiator for us is the rainbow, isn't it? And so, I mean, other initiations, Steve, I'm going to come over to you. I mean, can you unpack difficulty for us? And, before we sort of, because, there's a tendency, isn't there, I suppose, human nature, if something is difficult, we just sort of either, try and dive straight in and really make ourselves totally uncomfortable, or in fact run the other way. But should we put a distance between anything that's difficult? And in fact, can we benefit from it? What practical wisdom do you have for us there, Steve?
Well, I think it's interesting, this whole topic about simplicity. There's a part of it that we want something, right? So I want, if I do X, I want X, so if I'll go do Y to get it. So we often think that, and we're biologically trained this way, millions of years of evolution, to avoid pain, to go find comfort. And because we've evolved this neocortex, we have these wonderful ways of avoiding pain and discomfort. So I think we're somehow here on this earth to do the difficult things. You know, if you have a daughter like on the high school basketball team, she doesn't want to play. You don't want her to play the 7th grade team. She wants to be constantly developing her skills. And if you lose to the conference champions one year, you want to get better and be able to compete the next year. So the challenges that come at us in life are constantly bringing forth from us the level of skills, the level of capacities to do the next things that we want to do. And that can be in any realm. In the realm of personal growth or interior development, that means how do we process these things? So a lot of things come at us and we want to control the external environment, but we can't. Many of the things that get imposed on us, obligations, tasks, come to us from the outside. So it's really a matter of how do we process that internally? What's the internal stance that we take? We could take a psychological approach, which is a fantastic interior approach. And it stops at the level of our individual selves or our social selves and our relationships. It doesn't go the next step. What I would say is to energetic or to spiritual. And that's where trying to connect to our higher self takes us even beyond just what we can remedy in psychological. So those difficulties that come at us, they're part of the challenge for why we're here. And I just want to say one last thing. I don't mean to be glib. I don't mean to be Pollyannish. It's not that, oh, every difficulty that comes along here, I'm just going to merrily turn to my higher self. You know, I've had, just earlier this week, I had to have periodontal scaling, cleaning on my teeth. So for several hours, I'm in the chair, very uncomfortable, very nervous, very anxious. I'm not just able to let my higher self let me evacuate that situation. That's very real. I've also had 3 relatives pass this year. One was a cousin that's younger than me. I mean, that's grief that's got to be processed through. So the fact that the challenges are, in one sense, good, that they draw from us the next set of capacities. I don't mean to speak lightly about them or to say people shouldn't also be able to take the time to retreat from that and heal themselves as they need.
No, I hear you, John. Sorry, Steve. I'm sure we all do. Sorry, I was looking in 2 places then. And I don't think that sort of sounds Pollyannish at all. And of course, it just really brings us. I'm going to go to you, John. I mean, it brings us into, you know, how does reality really work when we're faced with reality? And indeed, I suppose what's my difficulty or simplicity could be a difficult simplicity or difficulty for another, right? You know, different lenses, different courses for different folk. John, you know, is difficult really difficult? And what's the reality of all of this? Over to you.
Okay. Well, I'll maybe work my way backwards into the question of what reality is. The place I would like to start from is that what we are taught to do, and Steve has kind of taken us to some degree in this direction, is we're taught to think about control, and we're taught to think about predicting, and we're, at least most of us, brought up in cultures and schooling which expect us to see the world and analyze it, and we're trained to be highly cognitive, which is kind of interesting, because I suspect that the group of people on this call is probably much higher than average in their ability to be intuitive and to use sensing skills, but we don't necessarily always use them or in the right way. So the first place of simplicity that I would point to is not to think that we can analyze and predict the future. So all the stuff that we learn about cause and effect, and a lot of the way that science speaks into the world, is in a suggestion that you can kind of take an event or a phenomenon in the world and you can extrapolate it in some kind of straight line, and you will know where it's going. That was never true. There was an illusion because of how slow things moved in the past, that it seemed like you could get away with that. But now we've got the world, the perma crisis, the VUCA world, or whatever terminology you use for complexity and unpredictability. And so the simplification that I would like us to get into is how to navigate the future from awareness and choice that is thoroughly located in the present. So I'll stop there. I can go on if you want, or we can kind of come back and explore where that leads as you wish.
It's a wonderful place to land us, really, isn't it? Awareness and choice is in the present. So how can we be awake to listen to that? And indeed, what can we use to help guide us? I mean, Mark, I'm tempted now to come over to you and to see what role colour, the language of colour, the energy of colour has to play in awareness and choice made in the present reality. Over to you.
Yeah. So but there's something that Steve mentioned about difficulties and kind of like, it makes me think of, I love film, as you know, so and I think film is just amazing. There's so many wonderful things in film. And when Steve was talking, I was thinking of the film Evan Almighty, where Morgan Freeman is playing God, and he's talking to Evan's wife. She's in a kind of a service station, and he says, if a man prays for courage, does God give him courage, or does he give him opportunities to be courageous? And that, even it's from a film, but I love that whole concept of like, and that the thing of simplicity, a lot of with color, it's combining it with kind of mythology and things like this. So the simplicity for me is going right back to the beginning. In Greek mythology, there was believed that we were all born with a daemon. It kind of like in Roman mythology, it's known as genius. But Greek mythology, it was daemon, but that hasn't grabbed on because of its possible slip of words and demon. But demon and so daemon is, it was believed that everyone is born with a daemon, and this daemon knows, let's say, knows your plan. It knows who you were born to be. And it was said that what we might now call as your intuitive hunch was actually your daemon sort of guiding you and pushing you in the right direction. And where that overlays with color, certainly in color psychodynamics, is that everyone is born, we use them again, Greek mythology, or we use the medium of numbers to get to color. So everyone has their own personal color based on their date of birth, numbers to colors. And what I've realized is that when you know your color, it's almost like knowing, because it's with you for life. And when you know, and each color has its kind of, let's say, archetype, ruling archetype. And therefore, it's almost like you've got this daemon, which I call like your bestest friend, who knows absolutely everything about you. Similar to what Steve was saying about this kind of like this self, this self which is fully complete. And the simplicity for me is, I would love when I'm working with people, it's just like, so Susan, I know your color is violet. So I would love to be able just to say, if I was working, it's just like, okay, Susan, just go home, find as many different shades and tones of violet as you love, and just work with that, because that will always keep you centered. And it's this, the simplicity, when things are so simple, we have a human way of making them difficult. I would love, because if you think color is an energy, so I'd love to say, go home and just work with violet, but we're human. How is that going to work? Why is that going to do that? What is that going to do? I need something more. So sometimes when we talk about simplicity, we like to make it difficult.
Well, that's interesting that you should say that. I mean, whether that's from the springboard of colour as a language and an indicator and an energy, whether it's, you know, the naughty little imps, you know, coming into play and taking us off course, or indeed, you know, there's something else that's around us. Well, if the little imp was our ego, our naughty little ego, you know, just taking us right off course. And I sort of feel tempted to actually come to you, Steve, as Mark, you know, did mention your name there, and sort of asked you about, you know, I don't know, these different lenses of simplicity and difficulty that we each might bring. And
I think it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, go with it, and maybe also bringing in playfulness, because Mark spoke of playfulness there, and of course that's an Edgewalker quality of being. So can I leave you with that, Steve?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm really amazed just hearing Jon and Mark talk. If color is a lens through which we can come closer to this inner self, this daemon, which is some kind of physical and non-physical DNA that makes us up, that we come into this world with some kind of unique combination. I'm 1/8 billionth of the planet, right? There's 8 billion other people here. No one else will ever replicate not only my DNA, but my whole selfhood. So color as being a lens through trying to bring us closer to that which we truly are. And Jon's point about awareness and choices in the moment. Wherever we go in life, it's going to be because of the choices we make in the moment, and that present moment awareness, if we're aware enough, can take us back to our truest self. So, you know, this thing about what do we want? This is what I was trying to say a minute ago about X and Y. It's like, why do we want to simplify? What is it about life that is causing us to say, oh my gosh, things are too much of something and I need to simplify? Is it peace? Is it freedom? Is it relief from all of these obligations? Do I just want to be able to relax and not feel like I am pulled through life? If that's the case, if that's what we're wanting, simplifying could be a way to do that. But we could also go get those things without feeling like we have to do some sort of control of the universe. And so Jon and Mark are giving us two of these ways about how to think about getting that peace, that freedom. Because when we connect to the truth of who we are, there's a whole upwelling of energy there that we feel, as opposed to the drain we usually feel in this, what I'm assuming we're meaning by simplify, that we feel like the world is just too much and it's draining me. But when I connect with this daemon of myself, when I'm in the moment and making an actual choice out of awareness, I feel a natural relaxation and a natural uplift of energy.
Yeah, and of course, you know, energy drivers, wherever they're from, need to take us up, we hope, don't we? You know, because of course, at the same time, energy can bring us down and bring us down into a real state of vulnerability. You know, I'm looking around the room here, and Mark, you keep mentioning film. You know, we've got a couple of actors in the room, would you believe, you know, who really probably have a lot of stories about film. And we've also got a lot of profound speakers here in the room, and also some really wonderful wisdom thinkers that would join your community in a nano, Steve. I'm going to pick one out, and they don't even know I'm going to pick them. Lara Corey, yes, don't giggle, Lara, it's you. Go on, come off mute, and yeah, hello.
How are you?
How are
I've
you?
lost sound. Oh, there we go.
No,
I'm
you're
very
here.
well, thank
There,
you.
Lara. Lara, just go on, share with us. Be your lovely you, and what are you hearing, and what's coming up for you?
Oh gosh, rather a lot's coming up for me, especially with regards to color and that being linked to date of birth, because I've always been drawn to a certain color and I never knew why, to the extent that someone once told me, if something exists in a color other than blue, which is the color I was always drawn to, you don't actually see it. And he said that after I was looking for a kitty bowl for my cat, couldn't find a bowl, and then I saw a blue one. I was like, okay, I'll take this. And he goes, you realize there's an orange one right next to it. And I honestly hadn't seen the orange one. So this is, now I'm wondering, I'm sort of going through all these experiences in my life. I'm also going, something that has come up is I've done a numerology reading, and it very strongly said you must be near water. Well, generally water is a blue color, whether we're looking at it or whether we're painting it, it's in a cartoon. So I'm now thinking of everything through this blue lens. I don't know if blue is my color, but it would make sense if it were.
Oh, well, we'll have to try and work it out for you. We'll do that. It's probably on Mark's site, www.colourforlife.com, but have a look. Otherwise, we'll send you. Mark, you want to say something to that?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, kind of like, if you go to colourforlife.com, I'll write it in the chat, and if you go to what color am I? Or I think it's kind of, I forget the title of the, sorry about that. What color are you? If you click on that, it tells you the calculations, and you may be, indeed, you may be blue. But I know Ralph put in a question in the chat about being green and wondering whether he was actually, whether he was born 2 days early, which is sometimes is like, nope. And I'm sure both John and Steve, we are born when we're meant to be born. There's no mistake. People say, oh, maybe I was born early, I was supposed to be born late, I was cesarean, I was No, we're born when we're meant to be born on that particular day, because we come with a certain, I think it was either John or Steve said that we come with a certain blueprint, a certain energetic, and it's that color that helps us be that. And it was just very quickly to add on about the daemon, something I learned. I love interesting facts, and part of, I don't know whether you know the origins of the candles on the birthday cake. Firstly, it was only ever one, and the origin on the the candles on the birthday cake was to celebrate the light and the daemon within the person. And you would buy gifts which recognized the gift of the daemon that was within the person.
Oh, wow.
So
I mean, Mark, you come up with these snippets. They're gold dust. They're not snippets, they actually are bits of gold dust.
So it gives you that whole different thing of when you're buying a gift, who you're buying it for the daemon, that kind of that unique person. And it's that, if you don't mind me saying, the simplicity of being. I was thinking about that because we talk about what do I do, and which I think today, and I don't know whether you agree with this, but you know, when we meet people, we say, what do you do? And I think it's a very polite way of saying, well, how do you make your money? Whereas maybe I work, maybe I earn my money in one way, which doesn't act. Whereas to me, the question should be, what is it that brings you alive? Because maybe I work somewhere that I do to pay the bills because I have, but I do something else away from where I make my money, which brings me much more alive. And that's my simplicity of being.
Well, you talk straight into sort of something that's very sort of hashtag trending at the moment, don't you, Mark? You know, which is, you know, our purpose, our reason for being, and our just cause. And I'm going to take it over to you, John, to see, if change is difficult, is it? You know, if simplifying is difficult, and is it? Identifying our purpose and trying to find a way that we can live that with love and bring peace, but still some prosperity in the ebb and flow of living and maybe working with our purpose. How can we do that in a life that is seemingly so fraught with change, or indeed so exciting with change? Over to you, Jon.
Well, so many wonderful threads to potentially pick up on. So I'll maybe just start by saying that in my cosmology, we choose when we're going to be born. And so that's part of where we come from. And we also come in with some purposes and life lessons that we've decided are going to be part of that journey. And what I'd like to add, I think, as a dimension to the conversation is not just looking at from who I am, but to get a sense of what the connectedness is in which we are operating. Because when I talk about awareness, yes, there is a level of awareness which kind of comes to me, and where I might be sometimes tapping into something that I would call my, higher wisdom, higher self, or whatever. But where does that sit? See, when I talk about the framing of reality, there are things that we have as part of the kind of wider awareness. We might talk about Akashic records, or kind of people who do constellations are aware of what's flowing in the field. But for me, the whole of existence is a flow of information in the field. And that's a fairly big notion, but where it links into why I spoke about awareness as being central is that if we're trying, and I'll just kind of divert to say one of the other things I love about color is it takes us into the body. See, when I talk about awareness, and when I spoke earlier about the fact that we generate a lot of the complexification in our minds, or in the expectation of what we have to be able to figure out in our minds, that actually our bodies know a great deal more. And that I mean, one part of my background, way before SQ, was understanding intuition, teaching people to be intuitive. And I'll even use the word psychic, because I want to make a distinction around psychic. A lot of people think that what being psychic is about is being able to see the future and predict it. And actually, most of the psychic activity that I'm interested in, and that is part of how I teach intuition, is about being able to detect what's in the present. But what's in the present consists of some things which are specific, which might be related to something I can feel about what are you thinking or feeling at this moment. But it's also our ability to connect into the flow of the universe as a whole. And when we operate from an awareness of that flow, then we make our choices from a place which is now centered not in something that I figure out with my mind, but something which I know from my being, and therefore can guide my sense of what is the best choice for me to make now.
Well, again, Jon, yeah.
Can I follow
Steve,
on to Jon's comment there?
Take it away.
Because what's fascinating about that view of reality, the Institute of Noetic Sciences just published a paper, Jon, you may be aware of it, in the Frontiers of Psychology, very scientifically documented from the basic materialist scientism point of view, talking about the fact that most studies in standard mainstream science on consciousness have a baseline assumption that consciousness flows from matter, that it's created from matter, that chemicals and neurobiology in our heads and synapses and neurotransmitters cause the sensation of consciousness. And they talk about several different ways that mainstream science does that, but they also talk about several different theories from which you could say, if that assumption is not correct, if consciousness is something which is alive in the universe, and each of us is an individual receptor of that whole flow that you were talking about, then we have a completely different way to think about how each of us are a node, maybe like in Indira's net, we're each adding to a large collective consciousness. So I got very excited when hearing you describe it that way, because that would affect how each of us go through our lives, including how do I respond to the pressure of the world? How do I think about simplifying? How do I try to take my life and, that I'm not one marble bouncing around in the world against other marbles who can make themselves a little more aware or not. That's fine and that's good. And I'd rather have more aware little discrete marbles than unconscious little discrete marbles. But there's another layer that maybe we're not just individual discrete, that we're sharing this consciousness. And I think that has a lot of implication for then how we think about how we pick up information, how we pick up stress from other people, from the environment, and how we then negotiate that. We have, in some ways, maybe less responsibility for worrying about all of that stress and can just relax. Anyhow, that's what I was prompted to respond to when you had that, kind of earth-shattering framing.
Well, thank you for picking up and expanding exactly. If it's exactly what I would have said if I'd taken 3 times as long. So,
well, I take a long time to say things. So.
Well, no, I meant, and I didn't mean it that way, but yes.
Well, you simplified what you said there, and it all wove and was beautiful together. And yes, thank you so much, Steve, for picking up on that practical wisdom. And indeed, just goes to show, as Jon said, you almost took the thoughts and words right out from him. And of course, that's the continuum of generative conversation, isn't it? And of course, hopefully the continuum of of our conscious connection and the return we get from engaging with each other and the return we get from connecting with each other. So that indeed, as you would say, Sharad Agrawal, that, in business and the busyness of business, it's not all about just return on investment, isn't it? Is it also that we can start looking at other economic factors and drivers, and those that are in us that can actually contribute to return on investment or the top and bottom line? Like, for example, Sharad, return on connection, return on engagement, community capitalization. Can I ask you about that? Over to you.
Sure. I actually joined a bit late, so I don't know if you already discussed that Viva Magenta is the color of the year for 2023. And I was doing a little bit of a deep dive on how and why they selected this color. And there are a few interesting observations. I'm going to read out a little bit from the notes that I took. They said it's an unconventional shade for an unconventional time, the color Viva Magenta. Someone also said it's a crossover between artificial intelligence and human creativity. This color encourages experimentation, self-expression without restraint. It is audacious, it is witty, it is inclusive. So what I did after reading all this, I went to my website designers and told them I need this color implemented on my website within the next 24 hours, and they did. I'm happy to share the URL of my website now in the chat and would love to get your feedback on that. Thank you, Susan.
Oh, bless you. Oh, thank you. In fact, so when you say they, you meant Pantone, and I'm going to, in a minute, pass it over to you, Mark, to just speak to, because I heard you just mention just now, Mark, that we're in an indigo year and we're going to move into a violet year. And yet we've got Pantone, and any graphic designers in the room, Pantone is sort of the authority voice of colours that we use in design. But before I do that, Sharad, I do want you to, I know, I mean, I didn't know this was going to come up, but I do know that you have something awesome to say around community capitalization and return on engagement and return on connection. Can you just give us a little bit of that so we don't lose it? Over to you.
All right, sure. So actually yesterday I was on a talk show with one of my friends in London. His name is Jamie Brett. And we were discussing the role of community in Web3, which is, you know, the new technologies that everybody is talking about, and which I think is very significant. And the role of community is so important in that in Web2, it was about competition, and in Web3, it is about collaboration. And if I may just give you a very quick example, Nike and Adidas fight every day for market share because they are in the same space. But in the night, they share statistics. Why? Because they want to understand consumer buying behavior. They want to grow the market and get a larger piece of the cake. So I call it Web 2 by day, which is competition, and Web 3 by night, which is collaboration. So that is a stark difference between where we were and where we are going. Another important difference is that Web 2 was about ROI, right? Web 3 is about ROE, return on engagement. And brands need to invest in that. And how do you get that ROE? By building a robust community where, you know, you're not talking about consumers. Consumers is Web 2. Fansumers is Web 3. Fansumers are your brand ambassadors who will champion your cause 24/7 without you even being part of that conversation. So I see the role of community being at the center of, you know, all businesses. And as somebody, you know, articulated very well, that brands today are valued by market cap. Tomorrow, they'll be valued by community cap. I'll leave it there.
Oh, well, thank you, Sharad, for bringing a bit of the busyness of business into this conversation where we're really just trying to simplify life, let alone get it into that commercial space. But of course, you know, we live to work, work to live, you know, which way round is it, question mark. But Mark, let's come over to you and sort of talk about into all of that, really, you know, about the differences of colour, about Viva Magenta, which, as Sharad was just talking about, Web3, and Web3, everybody, is the emerging internet where metaverse and immersive experiences are. And I also noticed in the article I read about Pantone and Viva Magenta that they've actually called it Magentaverse, Mark. Yes. So over to you.
Yep. So it was interesting listening to everything that you said, Sharad, kind of after talking about Web3, because the whole thing of community and connection is very much the essence of what Magenta is about. It's about really, it's that mix of rose and violet, if you look at, and so that one part is very much about how do we connect, how do we communicate. So it's turning it into we, us, instead of I, me. That's what kind of, so it's interesting that Pantone, you probably, I don't know whether they mentioned, but basically they observe everything that's happening in community, everything that's happening in society. And they have all these sociologists observing what's happening in the world and the trend forecasters. And based on what they notice, they then actually come up with the color of the year, the Pantone color of the year. And it's interesting that they now have Magenta or Viva Magenta. And it's interesting if you look at it, because you can look at so many different variations of it, and it very much looks like some of it looks deep red, other times it looks pink. There's so many variations of it, but it's all about community. It is about community connection and about how can we do this together. Now, equally, there is, let's say, from my perspective, from color psychodynamics, we say that every year has its own color, which is different to, let's say, the Pantone. This is worked out by literally using, again, the medium of numerology, and we add the numbers together. So, which is why Susan was saying this year is an indigo year. So 2 + 2 + 2 is 6, which in color terms is indigo. And indigo is very much, an indigo year is very much what I call the gloop year. You know how the caterpillar transforms into the butterfly, but at a certain point it goes through literally it loses all sense of shape and form, and it's just like this gloopy mess. Well, I think most people will tell you that I've had messages and say, when is it going to end? I've had enough of this gloop. When is it going to start to reshape and reform? Well, 2023 is a violet year, which again, if you link to the chakras, it's the crown chakra, which is about what connects us. It's about connecting us to spirituality, connects us to our something greater than myself. So it's like becoming all that I can be in order to serve the greater community. But equally, what's interesting is we can kind of like look to the other side of it to keep, let's say, to keep things in balance. The shadow side of the violet is very much about dictators. And so it's then looking at actually about abuse of power. So it's then observing and looking what's happening and where we see the challenges. Like I said, there's these opportunities to become. So I kind of think for next year, there'll be the opportunities for people to step up and say, yeah, this is who I am. This is what I can contribute to community. So it's interesting that violet and magenta, and a mix of magenta is violet as well as pink.
Wow,
so there's hope.
So much there.
I would say there's hope for what's gone on this year. And if you're curious, just go back over, look, we're in 2022. Look at your year in 2013, look at your year in 2004, because all of those were collective indigo years. And there are an opportunity to let go of what no longer serves me. It's kind of one of the archetypes of indigo is chaos and death on all levels of being.
Right, well, I'm going to take that from there, Mark.
Yes.
I mean, there is so much there, and I've got bits for Steve and bits for Jon, although I know you could both take them. And actually, from where you've just landed, I'm going to take the Jon bit first. And Jon, that's talking into polarity. And I heard Mark talk a lot about polarity there. And indeed, you know, when we're trying to simplify something and we see the dark and the light, or the dark and light side of violet or magenta or whatever it is, you know, it can get more confusing, can't it? Or indeed, if we're able to really lean in to the energy and the wisdom of polarities, how can that help us in decision making and feeling a sense of the reality now? Over to you, Jon.
Thank you. Well, there's a couple of places I would go with polarity. One is that, again, going back to the way that our culture works and the way we're educated, we do tend to be brought up to think that there's a right or wrong answer to everything, and to think that wherever you're offered some kind of polarity, you have to choose one or the other and stick with it. And, you know, those of you who are maybe familiar with things like polarity management, the reality is that polarities are dynamics to work with, and so that what we need to be able to do is to be able to choose in flexible ways according to the conditions that we're facing. And that may mean that what was right yesterday, in yesterday's context and with yesterday's data, actually no longer is the ideal choice for today. So there's a lot in this that kind of goes into areas like agility and agile thinking, and that in order that it kind of goes back to what I'm saying about the connectedness, that the more you're able to tune into the wider sense of the flow of data, and that Steve unpacked so well, is that you have a much better informed context in which to frame your choice, and that you can do that with a much more intuitive gut feel sense, knowing what's right in your, feeling what's right in your body rather than figuring out what's right in your head. And so that you engage with polarity from an awareness that actually paradox is built into the universe. There is no such, and there's, you could go into Gödel's theorem or all sorts of things which say that actually, there's a degree of unknowability that we have to be willing to settle with and be comfortable to live in the midst of. And when you go into that through the body and the sensing and knowing what you know uniquely for you from where you are, then that's part of the simplicity that you can let go of the polarities and just find out, okay, where am I today?
Jon, thank you. And indeed, I mean, I took polarity over to you, and people in the room won't know why. It's because, of course, you're just such a profound guide and teacher in the area of polarity, as you are in spiral dynamics, as you are in spiritual intelligence, and many other of these sort of most wonderful or emerging and alternative ways of us to know so that we can be. And indeed, Steve, coming to your practical wisdom desk there, I'm hearing a lot of words that I think speak so beautifully into spiritual intelligence, which I suppose in its simplest definition, and Cindy will be listening in here, is the ability for us to remain wise and compassionate and keep those wings, fluttering, whatever is going on inside of us, and in fact inside of the moment, and not lose it, so to speak. But the other bit that I love about spiritual intelligence is the practice around stretching our worldview, so indeed that we eventually just become one. And I'm hearing words from Web 2 to Web 3 that say common unity, community, common purpose for common good, inclusivity, collaboration. And indeed, it wasn't said, but I heard Sharad mention a friend of ours called Jamie Brett. And Jamie talks about digital economic justice in this fourth industrial revolution that we're in now, the digital era. Steve, I mean, doesn't it just sound wonderful that we could use the stretching of worldviews to make things a little bit more simple? Over to you, Steve.
That would be wonderful. That's my hope. I've only been dipping my toe into Web3. I know you do a lot of work in that area, Susan. What's amazing to me is Jon's work in polarity, I think, brings us into a truer view of our interconnectivity. Web3 is bringing us into a closer, truer, really, representation of our interconnectedness. And that's certainly one of the primary underlying premises of spiritual intelligence. It deals both with inner and with outer skills, but one of the outer skills, I forget if it's 6 or 7, is relating to the interconnectedness of all things. Maybe all of those are, in a way, ways to help us deal with complexity. Polarity, you're right, Jon, it's not polarity management, it's polarity observation or polarity flow. or polarity dynamics, that's a way to deal with complexity. Web3 might be giving, it feels very complex to me, but when you're in it, it's immersive. So there's a way that the complexity drops away. Maybe those are ways to simplify. And maybe, I didn't say it well before, but maybe this is what I meant about we can lose a little bit of responsibility. So much of the pressures of the world impinge on us. And of course, we put our armor back up. We got to figure out, okay, how do I get the kids to soccer practice tonight before I get to the PTA committee meeting? That sort of stuff makes us really contract and handle the details of life and make us think that we're responsible for all these things as an individual little entity. And that's true. But can we do that at the same time that we're widening our awareness to this immersive, interconnected fact, and that I'm not responsible for all of that? I can relax into being part of something larger. I don't think I'm articulating that as well as I want, but there's some feeling I get that when I think about my interconnectedness, I'm not feeling as responsible for each of the details. I can just be my part of it. I don't know, that's what comes up for me as you talk.
Jon, you take it, please, because we're going to just do a little to each of you. Go, Jon, carry that.
Well, I'd like just to extend this whole way of thinking to just to offer you all a thought that we tend to think of ourselves as things. We're used to being biological entities of solidity, and we go through life as a thing and an identity. But what is also going on, and I think maybe actually the bigger piece of the picture, and this kind of relates to even to the way Web3 works, is that what is taking place is all defined by relationships between things, people, actions. So we actually live in a relational universe. And if you think of yourself as a collection of kind of thoughts and relationships to everything that is around you, it creates a different way of thinking about your identity and the identity of those around and the nature of the world itself. And Web3 is also kind of unpacking that, because there's so much in Web3 that is relational, and that the collaborational features that have been talked about also sit in that space. So that may be a little bit kind of mind-blowing to stop thinking of yourself as a thing, but rather to think of yourself as a flow of experience. But it's got lots of meat in it. That's twice I've talked about meat, and I'm a vegetarian. Never mind.
How interesting. They say words matter. They really do matter. So have a little think about that. But indeed, words do matter, and they were profound words. And I think, I don't know how Web3 came into the conversation today quite a bit, didn't it? But of course, what it does, it brings us right the way back round to one of your first sentences, Jon, and Jon, yes, and that was the question. So, how does reality really work? And of course, Web2 is where we are real, and as some of you have been saying, Web3 is the immersive, mixed realities, but feeling good about the fact it's always you. So there's reality in this immersive experience. And indeed, if in this, whether we're in the world we are now on Zoom, building community, for common unity, for common purpose and common good, and if Sharad, we get some community capital out of that, then that's, real for me too, as much as it is as to be able to sense the future, that very first Edgewalker skill, just to be able to sense what might be emerging. And I think what we can sense is, or how we can sense and how big our sense is really just as large as our imagination, isn't it? And as large as our ideation, isn't it? And indeed as large as how we can collaborate and communicate, collaborate and work together to create that world that is on that platform of digital economic justice. So look, we are coming to a time where the currency of time says that we must move on. So Judy, I'll soon be coming round to you, but I just thought, Mark, I'd just give you, 60 seconds to sort of try and round us off and into the next phase of today's discussion. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Susan. So it is thinking of what Jon and Steve have been saying, of bringing it all together. And again, with color, it's exactly that. It's that having that relationship, because I always say, if you take it to the basics, we don't have a relationship with color. We say, I like this color, I hate this color, but we never think of it from color's perspective, which is a living energy. So it is about building a relationship and understanding it, and equally, like Jon was saying about paradox and about the, kind of, it's finding the balance. Some of the work that I do is I work with psychodrama, where we're always inviting to become the other. And it's only in psychodrama we say that the difference between a fundamentalist and someone who has compassion is because someone with compassion can always imagine how it is to stand in someone else's shoes. And I think that's the invitation that I see about the simplicity and the difficulty. It's holding both and actually being able to hold the tension. I think Jung called it about holding the tension of opposites. And I think that's maybe the invitation for, and what I hear from this conversation is that's the invitation for going forward, is about learning to hold the tension of opposites and if we are pulled in one direction, that's fine, but still keeping an awareness of the other. And for me, it's that once we know our color, that's the place I come back to. That's my coming home place. That's my central place. That's what brings me into myself and connects me, but I can equally hold the tension of the opposites. Hopefully, that's the plan. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but as it gets better. But I think it's the learning, holding the tension of opposites.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, audience, as well, for some of your wonderful commentary in the chat. I mean, I can't get to it all, but thank you for appreciating. And indeed, I don't know, I just love going into that tension of the opposites, and I just really enjoy working with polarity, particularly the polarity of words and the energy of a different word. I mean, for example, if we say the word baggage and the word luggage, I think you get a different energy in the words. And in fact, I said the energy of those words in the opposite way, meaning normally I'd say light luggage and baggage is heavy. And indeed, it's exactly the same thing, aren't they? Luggage and baggage, but one just feels much lighter and more difficult than the other. Judy, I wonder if you could now, give us some thoughts and round us up and take us into the next phase of this evening by giving us the lens of you, the author of Edgewalkers, and just thinking about, do you know what came up for me, Judy, is that we ought to ask Mark to take the 5 archetypes of Edgewalker and give each one a colour. The Edgewalker, the flame, the hearth, the placeholder, and indeed the guardian. Over to you, Judy.
Thank you. That would be so much fun. And we've actually given them each a color, but I have no idea whether they resonate or not. So that would be a wonderful thing to do. What an amazing conversation. And I know from some of the comments, people are wishing this really was going on a whole lot longer. I could see this being like an all-day workshop, listening to the 3 of you, Jon, Steve, and Mark, and with you weaving everything, Susan. I guess one of the things I want to say is Mark's last comment about the tension, holding that tension, really is edge walking. That edge walking is walking between and integrating different worldviews, different ways of being. And the ones we focus on the most in edge walking is the tension and the integration of the spiritual world and the material world. And I once interviewed Tammy Simon, the CEO of Sounds True, for the book Edgewalkers. And she said, and it blew my mind, she said, I don't think I'm an edgewalker. I don't think I'm the right person for you to be interviewing, because I don't see those as walking between two worlds. There's only one. And that's the difference between a consciousness of separateness and a consciousness of oneness. And talking about where humanity is going, we have come from such a consciousness of separateness. And it really is necessary for humanity, if we're to survive and evolve, it's necessary to go to a consciousness of oneness. So Steve started us off with self-awareness, talking about that, which is the bedrock of working as an edge walker. That absolutely cannot do this walking between worlds without self-awareness. There's been a lot of talk about sensing the future. And in the work that I did on knowing the future, we talked about 3 approaches. And one is a linear, the scientific linear, predicting the future from the past. And that's typically what happens in the business world. But when you talk to CEOs, they actually really use the second way of sensing the future, which several of you have talked about, which is an intuition. They just don't want to tell their boards and the public that they make decisions based on intuition, but they do. And the third way is the community way, the collective creating the future together. And that's so much what we want to do in this Edgewalker community, is to create the future together. So I'm just so grateful for this conversation. We're getting ready to do more conversations in the future. And Patricia Campanile is going to host our next Edgewalker Cafe on January 5th. Her guest is Amy Bernstein. And then we also have one coming up in February. We do these once a month. So this is part of our way of building community and connection. So we want to invite you to go to the Edgewalker, edgewalker.org website to see what's coming up, and sign up for the Edgewalker newsletter if you're not already on it, so that you can see what's coming up. All of that can be done on our Edgewalker website. If you're really wanting to go more deeply into the Edgewalker work, we're starting another Edgewalker profile certification program in January. And so I'm Judy, Judi, at edgewalkers.org. If you're interested in learning more about the profile certification, I'll put my email in the chat. We'd limit that class to 6, and we already have some people signed up. So if you're interested, don't wait, because that does tend to fill up. I think that's it. And just to also welcome that we do have several Edgewalker certified facilitators on this call, including Patricia Campanile, who's been with Susan and I from like the very early days. Yeah, Patricia, aloha. And there's several others, and that community is growing as well. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Bless you, Judy. Thank you so very much. That's really wonderful. Well, we're sort of just going over that 75 minutes now. So those of you that feel that you need to leave, please do. But I'm actually going to say I would stay around another 3 minutes if I was you, because Ellis Ralph is going to play us out. And I know Ellis has found something tucked in his top drawer that just speaks very much to the difficulty of simplifying what we do. So thank you all for coming, and over to you, Ellis.
I thought this theme was how simple it is to make things difficult. But I won't waste time on that. Some say the good life was something in the past. The good old days have gone by, and the good things never last. But don't listen to those who say the good life's gone away. I'm here to show you these are the good old days. A simple life means living a life that sets you free. You decide what to do, what to be. Some think the good life will be when the ship comes in, as if nothing could look right or be worth living until then. Their favorite myth is someday their wishes will come true, but what they miss is the good life is here today for you. A simple life means living a life that sets you free. You decide what to do and what to be. Embrace simplicity, creates the space to breathe. Every day, every pain may be released. Reliving your memories, that is not the life you need. Yesterday is dead, and tomorrow's not guaranteed. So live in the here and now, thinking about and thinking of the ones you love and how they hold you in their love. Simple life means living a life that sets you free. You decide what to do and what to be. To embrace simplicity creates the space to breathe every day. Every pain may be released. To find the good life, find the people and the places where you can be yourself, where you can share your song. It'll be love at first sight when you see their smiling faces, when you give love to someone else. You are right where you belong. A simple life means living a life that sets you free. You decide what to do and what to be. To embrace simplicity creates the space to breathe every day. Every pain may be released.
Wonderful, Ellis. Thank you so much. That's just so very, very special. And heaps of appreciation to you, and then strummed around to Mark, to Steve, to Jon, to Judy, and to you, Patricia, and you, Peggy, and Sandra, and Cindy, and Lara, and Adriana, and Jane, and Annalise, and Chaminda, and every one of you there, and Saha. And thank you all very, very much for being here. You too, Ralph, and Jessica, and Payal. And so I say goodbye, and we'll see you soon. As Sharad would say, we see you on the other side. God bless. Thank you. Bye. That's wonderful.